So this is our story, basically. So born and raised in South Africa. I know a lot of you have seen that South Africa is kind of making the news the last few weeks for the wrong reasons. But that's kind of, that spurred the moment why we're here. And we've been here since the first time at the Bear Conference or the Bear Center. So we've been here every year supporting these guys, a great group, a great conference. And so, yeah, I mean, last year we were kind of questioning some things from the sidelines, and they threw me in the pool because I did that. And so if you guys want to go through that, so basically, you know, first generation, we've been here since 2006. We started on our own in 2014. So my wife joined me full-time in 2018. We started consulting some, you know, about Regen Ag. We've been doing cover crops since 2009, 10. And then today we farm about 1,000 acres. We got a lot of guys into sheep, and some of them are trying to get out. Some of them already out, some of them in this room. But we've been with sheep since 2007. And then 2016, my wife decided to go all hog on the sheep and go from a hobby farm to basically a commercial size. And so she quit her job in 2018, and she's been on the farm full time. And then, so we're actually launching our own meat label this year, which is kind of exciting. And we got enough demand and enough requests that we're finally going to go that way. We were engaged with a packer from 2018 to 2022 that produced to Whole Foods, and we were part of the GAP program. I know Kelly was part of that too, and that packer and that program kind of went sideways, so we decided to separate paths. So we started this in 2022, basically trying to get guys to spend less money and still raise the same crops and make more profit, which a lot of the, you know, big ag, we always joke about put more on, you know. It's become a habit or a kind of joke for us when we do conferences. When someone talks about yield, we'll just joking, you know, just put more on, because that's kind of the big ag theory of how to raise yield. So a lot of you have seen this Liebig law. Actually, the guy who started that was called Sprengel, 1840. So my point is, nutrition is not new, and finding the lowest spoke in that barrel is not new. So we're all trying to raise crops, we're all trying to be profitable, but there's always something lacking. And for the last 80 years, we've been finding or trying to find that in the chemistry. Everyone's been ignoring the biology, but prior to the 40s, we've been using, you know, our grandparents used biology. They used green cover crops. They used to plow in the cover crop and get the green nitrogen, get everything from the soil. But when we started NPK in the 40s, we started walking away from that. So we started asking, you know, what if you bring biology into this and then adding carbon as well? So this is a test or a soil test. It's not, we use several companies. This was actually one pulled by Crop Scout for a customer. And you'll notice my joke on the bottom, Flintstone Ag. These things are 80 years old, 90 years old, the same thing we've been using for the last 80 years. There has been hardly anything new came out on the same old chemistry. In the last few, I would say 10, 12 years, a lot of labs have jumped on the soil health assessments, and that is something we're really excited about. But if you go on to a typical, this was done for a 240 bushel corn crop. The samples were pulled. This is the recommendation that came with the soil samples that was pulled for a 240 bushel crop. If you notice in the top there, 290 pounds nitrogen, 80 pounds of Voss, 100 pounds of potassium, pound of zinc, and 10 pounds of sulfur. Does this look normal to most of you? That's what you get. How many in here have done Haney's? Probably 20%. How many of you are still doing the same standard soil test that is basically recommended? A few guys, the rest. So, okay, so that's what you're getting. Okay, so that went really fast. Chase, help. All right, we'll try again. All right, so that's where that, if you go to that recommendation, that's what that is. So $269, if you follow the lab's recommendations, that's what you'll end up at. $269.65 for 240 bushel corn. If you do the math, if you add the irrigation, if you add the rent, if you add equipment, if you add land costs, that's why the Midwest is complaining you can't make money with $4 corn. Because we're starting pretty deep into the pocket with that. So this is a total nutrient digest. Who in the room have done a total nutrient digest? It's going to be a long afternoon. Okay, so not a lot of you. So I could pick on Terry in the back there to tell us what it is, but we'll just explain it. So basically what they do when they do a total nutrient digest, they keep dumping it in acid over and over and over again to see how much they can extract out of that soil. And that's so basically that's everything that's in that soil profile. In the profile that you pull, it could be 6 inches, could be 12 inches, depends on how deep you pull that soil sample. But it's basically everything that's present in there. Now this is not available. This is what you get if you do a chemical test, you don't see this. You have to ask for a total nutrient digest, and they basically tell you what is all in your soil. And you'll notice on the top, they start with carbon, and then nitrogen, and then Voss. So if you look at the value, this is for top 6 inches on this specific sample. So nitrogen, we have 2,093 pounds in the top 6 inches. Who thinks that's enough to grow a crop? So how do we get to that? So right now, that's not available. If you do a normal test, like the Flintstone test that I showed you when we started, that's not going to show. Same with Voss. So phosphorus, we have 962 pounds. And if you look at those, that tells you per product what that's worth. So if you look at on the right-hand side there, it shows you 4,500 pounds of 4600 and 4,200 pounds of 115020 per acre, per 6 inches. That's not the whole profile. That's just in the top 6 inches. This is what's in your soil. Now, every one of you, the challenge, go take one farm and pull this test. See because this will change on every farm. You don't have to do it every year. Just do it once, because that is not going to change much over the next 3, 4, 5 years. That's going to stay there with you. But if you don't do it, who is wanting to get into, Zach was just talking about biologicals and compost. Who thinks that's a great idea? A lot of you. Okay, that's why you're here. Why? What's the carrot of doing it if you don't understand what's available? This is what you're after. This is why you're doing the biology, because this is what you're going to go after. So if you look at how much is available in that little savings account, you can't get to it because you don't have the code. It's like a Bitcoin deal. If you don't have the code, you can't get what's in it. So you have to figure out how to get into that. That's the safe. That's what the T&D is. Everything that's in there is in there. You can't get it. If you follow the last 80 years of principles in chemistry, it stays in there. You're going to keep having to buy $270 an acre of mineral every year, or fertilizer, because you don't have access to this. So how do we get that out? Rip it deep. Isn't that what they tell you? You got to rip it. So you can go rip it. You can go blast it any way you want to. The reality is you're not going to be that successful. The only key to that safe is biology. That's the only way you're going to get that out. So how do we test? Well, we just mentioned Ward Labs in the back there. You got a soil health test that they offer. You can go to several other labs. The Haney test is very popular. It's basically a way to extract. They use softer chemicals to try and mimic nature to pull a sample and show you what's available via your biology. You cannot get this on a normal chemical test. You have to ask for the Haney or the soil health assessment test to get this. So this is what a typical 0 to 6 inch looks like. This is not the same farm as the other one I used. but we'll use this example, and we're going to cover this specific farm a little bit later. So that's top 6 inches. Phosphorus, we got 15 ppm, potassium 236, zinc 10.35. Okay, who's got zinc levels of 10 ppm in their soil in this room? If you do, awesome, but I'd like to visit with you. So we have some of the highest zinc I have seen, and that's the reason we do, the crazy stuff no one else wants to, because we keep digging and we keep wanting to get answers. But that's about 25 pounds of zinc available in the top 6 inches. How much zinc do I need to apply? Nothing. How much does that cost? Write that down, how much a pound or 2 pounds of zinc is going to cost you. Let's look at Voss. So 15, about 25 pounds available in the top 6 inches. We'll keep adding to that here in a little bit. If you go down the line, something we always pay attention to is sodium. We want to try and keep that sodium low, because sodium, potassium, if sodium gets higher than potassium in the base saturation, then the root can't distinguish between the two. You start getting salt uptake in the plant, which you're trying not to do. pH, 7, 8. We're also pH, just like everyone else in this room. Excess lime rating, soil respiration, pretty average for dry land. Microbial activity, carbon, active carbon, pretty decent, but not great. So all in all, pretty decent sample, but not that great. But we're starting to see the nitrogen. We didn't even cover the nitrogen. So on the nitrogen, total nitrogen ppm is 25, organic 12, ammonium 0.2 nitrate. So when you do a soil test, like we did on the Flintstone one, you're going to see these two, ammonium and nitrate. That's all you're going to get. So how much of that is the 25? So we got half of our nitrogen available, and half of our nitrogen is in the typical soil solution, which is what you would get in a normal soil test. So 12 and 12 is 25. So how much more nitrogen did we get available? Basically double. So by doing the soil test, it shows us we would have seen the 12 if we had done a normal test. Now it shows 25 through the extract. So we've doubled the available nitrogen that our plants have access to. That's 12 ppm that we didn't know we had, that we were going to apply for, that we don't need to. And that's another 20, 30, 40 pounds of savings. Molder chart. If you've heard me talk before, it's on every slide. I don't even care if we talk about politics or sheep, the molder chart's on there. Who have seen this? Okay, a few hands in the room. So basically what the molder chart shows, and it's based on chemistry, not biology, but basically what it says is for every element there is, it has a reaction or antagonistic effect or a stimulation effect to other nutrients. If you look at the one that I always focus on is calcium. If you look at how many arrows goes from calcium to the other elements, and how much your local co-op, whoever is your fertilizer supplier, mentions calcium, it's the only thing I really want to point out on this. We focus on NPK. Okay, we'll pick on NPK for a little bit. So nitrogen. If you're where I farm from, or where I live, 300 pounds of anhydrous this time of the year is pretty popular. Okay? What does that affect? It affects boron, it affects potassium, it affects copper. If you don't have boron, that plant's not going to breathe, it's not going to cycle, it's not going to let calcium move back and forth. So if you over-apply nitrogen, the reality is you're probably going to be short on boron. What's copper do? That's your fungicide. So if you put in nitrogen, last year we had same guy that applied 300 pounds nitrogen had gray leaf spot at 6-leaf. Okay? Why? Because the natural copper of the plant was not available because of too much nitrogen early. We can go through every one of those elements, and everything affects everything else. So anytime you have a deficiency, the chances are you created that deficiency by over-applying something else in that whole circle. So that's why we really, really focus on balance, because on the chemistry side, a balanced chemistry plant allows for more exudation, allows for more photosynthesis. So it helps you in the future with that plant being a healthier plant. This is a ratio calculator that I'm busy working on. We got a few guys helping us with this. All we're basically doing is taking that soil sample, putting it into this, and then I'll show you guys here in a second. Last thing, I need to drop that. So basically, that's the inputs from that soil sample. We got phos-sulfur ratio, which needs to be 1:1, potassium magnesium 1:1, phos zinc 10:1. If you look at the soil sample, we're 3.5, so we need to get the phos up or the sulfur down. Or other way around, sorry, we got to get the sulfur up or phos down. Well, if you look at phos recommendations and you tell a guy he doesn't need phos, he's going to like, yeah, I don't believe you. Well, the reality is, if you want to balance the ratios and you don't want the motor chart to get out of whack, you don't need to apply more phos. You need to get the sulfur up. If you look at potassium magnesium, you know, you got potassium low, magnesium high, so you need potassium. Usually, when you have potassium lower than magnesium, you're looking at a pretty tight, pretty high bulk density soil with a lot of lack of infiltration, pretty crusty. That's just the way it is. Your pores is not there, your aggregate stability is not there. If you have it the other way around, it's less detrimental than this way. If you have potassium higher than magnesium, you probably have a lot of infiltration. You probably have a pretty good soil, but you might lack some, chlorophyll and photosynthesis at times because of magnesium. So it's always better to have the potassium higher than what this looks like. Phos zinc, you want to be 10:1. We're 2, so, we're not. It's not as bad as you would want it to have it. So in this case, we would apply a little bit of zinc in furrow, but we wouldn't get too carried away with it because we do have some zinc. So why is the ratios important? Maintain balance, prevent antagonism, increase plant health, become more efficient and profitable. One thing I do need to mention, we are not chasing yield when we're trying to balance nutrients. We are trying to get our photosynthesis up. We're trying to get chlorophyll levels up. We are trying to build exudation because we are trying to feed the microbes. When you have a plant that's out of whack, you're probably low Brix. If you're low Brix, you have lower exudation than a plant that has high Brix. So we're trying to get the photosynthesis up so we can try and get the exudation up so we have more sugar going down into the plant. Who's got sandy soils? Are they this sandy? Pretty much? Same? Yours is red, I know that. Ours is white. This is what we typically look like on a conventional farm in southwest Kansas. So this is our farm. First year we farmed it, 2014. We have now been on it for 10 years. So this is a cover crop we got on it right now. The guys in the room that are anti-cover crops going to see the 3 pigweeds in the front and go like, yep, that's it, pigweeds. That's what we're going to produce. There's some pigweeds in this picture. But with the cover crop that we have now, 1, we're not blowing. 2, we're building aggregate stability. We're building organic matter. And 3, that just froze out like 3 weeks ago. We had a very hot fall like most of you, so everything's been staying alive. The radishes just died. So you go and you take a 12-inch by 12-inch pot. You cut all the cover crops off up down to the ground. You send it into the lab, and they tell you, what does that give you back? And that goes, not 100% of it, but a big percentage of that will go towards next year's crop. So if you look at this, again, there's carbon, nitrogen 105 pounds, phosphorus 16, et cetera, et cetera. Zinc, not so much this time. But 105 pounds of nitrogen, 228 potassium, and 16 phos. In this room, if you have that much available for a dry land cotton crop, who would need more fertilizer? Why would you put more fertilizer down if you know that is what you're going to grow? There's a lot of push towards fallow. Fallow doesn't produce that. You're going to lose about 70% of the moisture that you preserve in a fallow system. Hands down, every year. Put evaporation pans out, put probes out, measure it for yourself. You will lose 2/3 to 75% of the moisture in a fallow year. So if you have a chance to use some of that moisture in that fallow year and produce this, not have a fertilizer expense the next year, why wouldn't you look into it? I'm not telling you to do the whole farm. I'm just saying, why would you not look into it? You have to have some moisture to get the cover crop up. I get that. But when there's green in the ditch, there could be green on the farm. So you go southwest of here, and they don't like it when I take pictures. Unfortunately, I drive through there a lot. There is areas that gets plowed every year after every rain, gets reached after every rain, because if they don't, they blow. They get moisture, they got to reach it because otherwise it blows. Then they reach it up, so it stops it from blowing. Well, what happens with the moisture when you do that tillage pass? Evaporates more moisture. It's an evil cycle. At some point in time, you got to figure out, if you drive in the area, there's that one guy that's been no-tilling for 17 years that has no-till cotton that is doing pretty decent. Find those guys. Don't listen to the guy that tells you it doesn't going to work. You don't go to a banker to ask for political advice. You don't ask your attorney to ask for marriage advice. It doesn't work like that. Why do you keep listening to the people that tell you it doesn't work? Find the person that does it, that makes it work. Those are the guys that's going to help you. This is the Haney soil test for that same farm. So we took that one, we did the cover crop analysis, we did a Haney. Okay, so nitrogen, traditional 5 pounds. So if I had done a normal Flintstone test, it would have showed me I had 5 pounds of nitrogen. If I go to the Haney, it says I got 36. Is that a difference? Do I need more nitrogen if I got 36 and 5? So $32 of savings an acre. Available P, 16 pounds. So now you add that to that, and you realize, like, dang, you got quite a bit of fertility there for the next year. So in this farm, we're going to go and raise sunflowers and milo this year, and we're going to put an in-furrow mix of about 75 different things that we'll catch up a little bit about. Yeah, just talked to Zach about it a little bit. I'm a big favor of what we call a multivitamin that we put in furrow. We want to make that plant think that it has everything it needs. But the reality is we want it to work, because if you put a lot of fertilizer out, do you think it's going to try and access that? It won't. What happens on a soybean plant when you put nitrogen down? It won't produce nitrogen because it has it. Why would it go work? Why would the rhizobia start working for you if they don't need to? And it's the same with this. Anytime you apply fertilizer, two things happen. One, you make it lazy, and two, you add more salt to the soil. So I'm not telling you to go cold turkey. All I'm telling you is be smart when you apply your fertilizer. Don't over-apply, and don't apply it if it's not needed. So that's what it looks like this last fall. This is another farm north. That's not the same farm. I'm not going to tell you that that's the same farm, because this is a farm north. This has been in our system for 16 years now. For 16 years, this farm has not had a day where there wasn't a green root growing on that farm, and it has not been tilled for 16 years. This is the first farm we started on. We can do 10 to 12 inches in the first hour and probably 6 inches in the second hour of rainfall on this farm. We have doubled our organic matter on this farm. When we started, we were 1.2 to 1.4. Right now, we're about 2.4 to 3.1. This is irrigation. A lot's like, irrigation. The pivot's nozzled 150 gallons a minute. So for those that, do irrigation, yes, it's irrigated. But we get by with a lot less water than what some of the other people get by. That farm, until 3 years ago when we put it to Bermuda, half that farm's to Bermuda for the sheep. Again, I told you, my wife has now got a sheep flock that she maintains. When she runs out of food, we need a marriage counselor. So we took half that pivot and we put it under Bermuda. The other half still cash crops. We still have a 221 bushel APH corn on that field with that gallonage. We have 800-gallon pivots in the area that don't have a 200 bushel APH. Water is one of the factors for yield. It's not the factor. That's all I'm telling you. You can get by and grow really good crops with a lot less water. So how important is roots? You can't build a system if you can't build roots. Dale was showing us the perennial grasses earlier, going down 4 feet. I'm on the fence with that, and I get in trouble for calling people out that tell us, they always show the picture of wheat that's got 12-inch roots, and then they show a picture of perennial grasses that's got 4-foot roots. Well, come to our farm, and I'll show you 4-foot roots on wheat. They suck at growing wheat. That's why they have 12 inches of roots. Don't blame the plant if you suck at growing something. It's that simple. You can have 4, 5, 6-foot roots on cash crops. You just got to manage it better. So it's a lame excuse to put, every acre in perennial grasses. I'm not saying you can't help the system by having more perennial grasses. There's farm ground that should not be broken out, period. But you get to the point. Roots is what builds the system. This is Probe's AquaSpy in our cornfield in July. You'll notice on the right the July 3rd, July 15th, July 18th. By July 18th, we usually are 2-3 leaves from tassel. We usually pass the 4-foot probe at that give or take 10, 12 leaf stage is where we usually go and pass the 4-foot roots. If you have 4-foot roots, and it's a whole different discussion, does that plant utilize that 4 feet, or does it only pull fertilizer from the top 6 inches? Anyone? Who thinks you're going to pull fertilizer deeper if you have roots that deep? Okay. Are we measuring for that? Do we ever go measure for that, or do we just keep doing the same 8-inch, 10-inch, 6-inch sample and then run a whole fertility program based on that 6 inches? So how much more fertilizer do you think we're applying than what we need? If you're pulling from 4 feet, but you're only counting for 6 inches. So 2 years ago, we did a study. We went on 3 farms, got NRCS. We really had to kiss ass to get them out there, I can tell you that. It was like a 2-3 year deal. But we finally found the right people. We got it done. So we went to 3 farms and did 5-feet probes, core samples, 2-inch core samples. We sent that to Ward, and it was a project we did with them. And we analyzed every 6 inches on the top 12 inches, and then every 12 inches below that, all the way to 5 feet down. We did a TND, we did a Haney, we did a PLFA, we did an NLFA. I don't know of any other study in the country that has done this at this point. So we opened up several cans of worms that people are still mad at me about. Because there is things that we notice now that we have never seen or done before that we're now realizing, and now we've opened up can of worms that basically now we got to figure out the rest. That's what it comes to. So this is the top 6 inches. This is the same slide I showed you earlier on the top 6 inches. So we'll just look at the basically Voss, nitrogen over here, and the salt. There's a lot to digest. It'll take us hours to go through this. I just want to run through these because we don't have, and there's cold beer outside. So we're just going to go through these to make a point to you guys, but I need you to look into this, and this is something you need to do on your own farm. This is the PLFA. We're only going to do one thing. We're going to look at the diversity. Okay, 1.5, which 1.5 is very good. So that's the top 6 inches. Functional diversity, Zach can probably better explain. Several people in the room that can probably better explain to it. But that's the amount of species of microbes, which includes bacteria, fungi, protozoa, that's in your soil profile. It's how many people is in the room. No, let me rephrase that. If there was languages, it would be how many different languages are spoken in that room. But there might only be one of each one of them, or there might be 51 of them. If you look at the total living, that's the quantity. Listening to Lars Gunnarsson a couple weeks ago, he explained, you want the diversity first, the volume will follow later. Once you have the diversity, you will build volume. Okay, this is fungal bacteria ratio, 0.33, very good. So that's top 6 inches, which is not uncommon. We're like, okay, we didn't really learn anything. Okay, that's our TND for the top 6 inches. Nitrogen, 1,740 pounds. Voss, 254 pounds, which is quite a bit. 6 inches, okay. Takes us 6 to 12. Phosphorus took a big old dump. We only have 4 pounds of phos available in that second layer. My assumption is because that's where most of the root mass is in what we farm. We have a lot of lateral roots going down in that second 6 to 12 inch layer. Again, that's the assumption. I'm not saying that is. That's my opinion. Looking at nitrogen, about half, about 11 pounds in that top deal. So now we're, 11 ppm, not pounds. Looking at the salt, notice how the salt picked up. So we're pushing salts down, but if you look in the base sat, so let's just go to the biomass first, 1.4. We're still pretty decent, slightly above average, not great. The biomass, living biomass, went down. But fungal bacteria, we kind of took a dump there. We're, slightly above average, but not as good as we were with 0.22. So this is the second one. If you look at the base, that's what I was talking about. Our potassium is still higher than sodium. So we're still good on that second sample. If you look at total nitrogen, this is from 6 to 12 inches. Nitrogen, 1,800 pounds. Phos, 379 pounds. Is that enough to raise a crop again? Yes. It's plenty. It's probably enough for you and your kids and their kids, but you got to get to it first. That's the problem. Okay, this is the bottom sample. And I skipped everything down because, again, we don't have enough time to cover that. But this is basically 48 inches to 60 inches. If you notice, phosphorus, we picked up. We're another 24, so another 50, 55 pounds of phos down below. Now, the samples above it was pretty similar. You look at nitrogen, we're only down to 4 ppm. So not a whole lot of nitrogen down there, but quite a bit of phos. Salt picked up quite a bit. We go to the PLFA. Our biomass went down big time. Our functional is still at a 1.3, so we're still slightly above average for our functional diversity. The thing that happens, though, is, which I don't show you, when we went from 48 inches to 50, like from 36 to 48, we still had mycorrhizal fungi. When we went to the bottom sample, we lost our mycorrhizal fungi and we're stuck with saprophytes. So we have digesters. So our corn roots are getting down there, but they're not getting down there enough to feed the mycorrhizal fungi and associate. So we don't have that mineralization yet at that 4 to 5 feet level, but we do have enough to keep the saprophytes alive. So that's something, a challenge for us. So we got, in April, we're going to do these tests again, and we want to see 2 years later if we actually have built and gotten the mycorrhizal fungi in the 5 feet level this time. So we're going to redo this to see. Oh, that happened again. Okay. So this is the bottom one. So we go back to the 2.9, and it shows you still good. So we still have a good fungal to bacteria ratio, but now we know it's only saprophytic fungi, and it's not mycorrhizal fungi. So we have work to do. So that's a challenge for us now to work on that. This is the bottom TND. If you look at nitrogen, 2,400 pounds of nitrogen in that bottom foot. That's a lot. So for us to get the biology down there, not only are we going to see the benefits if we can get the mycorrhizal fungi to actually colonize that bottom feet, but we're going to see a lot of extra nitrogen available to that plant if we can get to that. Phosphorus, 1,500 pounds. So basically the point is there's a ton of fertilizer that we have. We just got to get it available and access to it. So some totals. You can read through that. So 38 pounds Voss available in the top 12 inches, about 90 pounds of Voss available in the 5 feet. How much Voss do you want to apply of that 90 that they told us to apply? If you have 190 pounds available, why? People keep questioning us when I tell them we raise 200 bushel corn crops with 2.5 pounds of Voss, and we have done that for the last 7 years. This is why. It's there. You just got to look for it. No one looks that deep. If you start looking for it, you realize you have it. You don't need to put it on every year. So if you look at not available in the top 12 inches, and you look at not available in the whole root zone, that's about 3,000 pounds per acre of Voss. You look at nitrogen, about 130 N available in the top 12 inches, and Terry did that calculation with me this morning, so if it's wrong, it's on him. And then not available, about 17,000 pounds of nitrogen in the top 5 feet that we have access to. It's not available, but we have access to it. We just got to work out and figure out the biology to tap into that. We don't need, I know Christine Jones gets a lot of flack for telling people to go cold turkey. It's not a great idea if your system is not ready for it. But this is where she's coming from. We have everything we need. We just got to be able to get to it. So increasing biology, I'm not going to waste too much time on this. Basically, what we're trying to do is we want the plant to be balanced. If that plant is balanced, it's going to have increased chlorophyll photosynthesis, build more sugars. It's going to exudate more. That's going to feed through the roots, which now we know can get down to 4, 5, 6 feet. And the more you can feed down there, the more you're going to have. That's our recipe, how we build this. So building block of photosynthesis depends on who you ask, but you either got calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, or boron, or you got sunlight, water, carbon, or enzymes. It's two processes from different direction that you look at it. So foliars. We have a lot of people that don't believe in foliars. And then there's some of the companies that believe in foliars because they want to sell you everything they have. A foliar is a great tool to use if you have a deficiency or if you want to have or trigger that plant into doing something purposeful. Like our goal is to stimulate that plant to photosynthesis. We want to put that plant in overdrive or turbo drive in photosynthesis. That's our goal with a foliar. Now, obviously, if you do a tissue or a sap sample, which I don't prefer either. If you're doing one, great. If you're doing the other, great. I don't have a preference over sap or tissue, and there's several reasons for that, which we're not going to go into. My point is, Dr. Fawcett told me one time, if you do a soil fertility program and you don't pick a tissue sample, it's like a guy studying for attorney but never take the bar. You never know if what you did is right. There's a way you have to test yourself, and the only way you test yourself is by pulling a tissue sample in that plant. By pulling a tissue sample, you can see if your plant is actually accessing what you've given it, or more or less. So you know if that plant's balanced. You don't know what it is until you check for it. That's why we use foliar. So we do a tissue sample, and then we apply a foliar to target that in very, very small amounts. If a company tells us we got to use a pint, we use 2 ounces. We're cheap, hands down. And it has worked great for us. If we pull a tissue and do a foliar, we usually pull a tissue 7 days later because, again, we want to see the reaction we got for the money we spent. And if we spend $5 or if we spend 50 cents or if we spend $12, we want to see the return on investment. If you don't check for the return on investment, how do you know it worked? Because the sales guy told you it works? We want you to check. We want you to test these guys. We want you to ask the why. Because there's a lot of products out there that is being sold on a premise that it works, but no one checks if it works. So these are things you can do on your own farm. You don't need a rocket scientist to check these things for you. So this is what we do on our own farm. So we soil test, obviously a little deeper than what those guys do. We don't have a rotation. Not at all. If it rains the 3rd of April, we're going to plant more dryland corn. If it rains the 3rd of May and we didn't get any rain in April, we might go to sunflowers or milo. If it doesn't rain in May, we might go cowpeas in June. Our rainfall sucks, just like you. So we make a decision on our non-irrigated acres. If and when it rains, then we have a rotation. That way we have zero money expended into that farm if it doesn't rain. Because if you got a fertilizer program that you've already strip tilled or no-till with a coulter and it doesn't rain, guess where that fertility is? It's not available because you don't plant anything to use it. And it's money spent. So why would you spend that money if you don't know what you're going to do yet? When you live where we live, which all of you are in the same area that farms in this area, that's nature. That's what you're stuck with. So why try and get into a fixed program if you don't know? Now, if you're an insurance guy, an insurance farmer, I'm going to pick on you. Keep doing what you're doing because you're probably not listening to what we're doing anyway. So if you're an insurance guy, great. Just keep doing what you're doing because you're going to keep fertilizing anyway. But if you really want to go into profitability and you really want to go into being successfully raising things at the right time for when you get moisture, there is absolutely no sense to be putting out fertilizer if you don't even know what you're going to raise. It's stupid. It's really what it is. So when we run it in furrow, we try and run as much of the 17 nutrients possible for that plant. We try and run a little bit of everything. I was telling Zach earlier, I saw a picture this morning on LinkedIn of a corn plant with bloodshot eyes and an ivy hanging into it, and I probably would have put that in here if I had it earlier. But we try and keep that corn plant, milo plant, cotton plant, we're trying to keep it high. From the time it sprouts, we want it to think that it's in utopia. It's got everything it needs. And you keep it high all the way till it's got the root system to actually do shit for itself. Because that's when it starts going down and it starts utilizing those roots and it starts working and actually starts associating with the bacteria and the microbes because it's there. But when it's early, it's hard to get to that. So you're trying to stimulate that plant as much as you can with very, very small amounts of literally everything you can think of. I don't know, is there anyone in the room besides some of the vendors that knows Russell Hedrick in North Carolina? Few guys. So 2 years ago, he broke the world dryland, non-irrigated corn yield record of 459 bushel. If you look at his program and how he got to that, he got 68 inches of rain, by the way. So his county APH is like 120. He's sugar sand. His organic matter is like 7 or 8%. The neighbors are like 1.2. So he's not raising 459 bushel because he got all the rain on his one farm. He's raising that because, like Jimmy Emmons says, every time he gets a rain, he's getting all of it. Every rain, every moisture that he's get goes in because he's got the organic matter to hold it. So he's out-competing everyone in this area because he has access to those nutrients because he's done the hard work to get his organic matter up. So we try and do compost tea, molasses. Carboxylic acid has become a huge topic for us in the last couple years. Every humic, fulvic, every acid is basically part of the carboxylic acid complex, and that's what plants naturally secrete to access these nutrients to feed the microbes. So we're digging into the carboxylic acids quite a bit, especially in the higher pH areas. There's a lot of benefits coming from that. So basically explaining that, natural carboxylic, short-chain carboxylic acids, natural compounds from plants or fermenting microbes to have long history, natural biopreserves. I challenge you to Google it, go into it, look into it. It's going to be the next big thing on any acids because more and more data is coming out that a lot of these acids, even amino acids, are some sort of form of the carboxylic acid family. So something that's interesting for us, we're like a sponge. If you enjoy what you do, you pick up these things and then you dig into them, and that's kind of where we are right now. Molasses, if you want to use a sugar source, go to Sam's, buy sugar. The reason we use molasses is because you get a lot more than just sugar. If you crush a sugarcane plant, there's a lot more nutrients. Basically, you have the chance of picking up all of those 12 nutrients out of a crushed molasses plant or a crushed sugarcane plant that's in that molasses. That's a reason it's about 2.5 times the price of sugar. Sam's is about 70 cents an acre. Molasses, give or take, rates about $2 an acre. We prefer to go the $2 an acre route because we get a lot more bang for our buck for the $2. If you're like soybeans or cotton, you just want to use sugar, just go to Sam's. It's like 70 cents a pound, put a pound an acre. But do start using sugar in a program. Read up on it, see why it's useful. So I think I've got another slide on it, but no. So the bottom line is what I want you to read. So if you go to NTS, Nutritech Solutions, there's a blog from Graham Sate on biochar condensate. Go and read it and find out or see what wood vinegar or biochar is about. It's basically the evaporation that they create from burning biochar. What they've realized is when you burn a pasture, or like the Flint Hills where they burn that every year, it excretes an enzyme called carotene, and that's what triggers plants to grow or basically speed up growing. And they took that, and they saw that it's the same enzyme in biochar condensate, so you can buy it now in a jug, basically, and instead of lighting your whole pasture on fire, you can spray it on and you get the same effect, is basically what it's about. It does smell like a fire. Worm extract, Zach talked about it. I just call it worm pee, because that's really what it is once you get all the liquids out. I can't say how much we enjoy using this product. From both a calcium perspective, also to a feeding perspective. Again, if you're going to go look at Nutritech Solutions, Graham Sate, he's got a blog about BAM, beneficial anaerobic microbes. I throw compost tea or worm extract, not compost tea. I throw worm extract into that beneficial anaerobic microbes class. Most of what you get is not usually a fungal dominant source. It's mostly a bacterial dominant source. Soils that are bacterial dominated aren't necessarily a bad thing if you have the right microbes. So when you're in a high fertility system and your soils are bacterial dominated, it's a complete different thing. That's not what I'm saying. When you dominate your soil with beneficial microbes, then you start getting digestions, and that's the food that you get feeds the fungi too. So again, go read into it, beneficial anaerobic microbes, and the worm extract that we use is really good, seeing really good results from it. Okay. Who believes in this room that GMO corn is bad for mycorrhizal fungi? Ha, I got a few. Okay, so this is a fully treated GMO corn. 24 hours after we plant it and 48 hours after we plant it. So, Zach was talking about the rhizosheets. We already start having colonization on that corn root 48 hours after we planted it. If GMO corn, and I'm not favoring anything, I'm just giving you the facts. If that plant did not associate with mycorrhizal fungi, why would you see that 48 hours after I planted it? We have put it in a scenario where that plant is happy. Now, is it going to have the amount of, colonization that you would have maybe with a heirloom corn? I don't know that because I don't have a side-by-side. That's something you can test in your own farm. All I'm saying is our fungi in our farm associate with whatever we give it. No matter what we plant, as soon as those roots are out, we're getting access to our fertility, we're getting access to our nutrients. We have the party going on at the root tip that everyone's talking about. If you've ever heard Chris Nichols, she's got like a 4-minute rant about how everything associates with the fungi. It's pretty cool, actually. If you've never watched it, go to YouTube. I'm sure it's on there. This is oats roots. I don't know. Ronald and I talked about it earlier. I think this was 2 or 3 days after we planted. This is basically non-GMO. That's GMO. It doesn't matter on our farm. If we put something out there, when it sprouts, it's there. The biology is there. Total nutrient digest, just basically telling you that right there and that right there is what gets you that right there. You can't have access to that if you don't have those other two. You have to get the biology going to get access to that. This is that same corn that 14 days after planting. We no-till that into a weed cover crop. The rest have died out. We usually spray it, paraquat, after we plant it. We do not have the humidity. A lot of guys, when they... Where's Dale? Let me pick on him a little bit. Is he still in here? So, a lot of guys start by reading Gabe or Dale or anyone's books. Then they come out here, out west, and they want to grow rye, and they want to roll it down and plant into it. And then, by August, it's all dead, and it's 8 inches tall. And they're like, okay, we didn't quite get to roll it. We do not have the humidity to get that stuff that tall. If you've never experienced it, go ahead and try it. So a lot of guys that start with rolling a crop here realize that pretty soon. There's maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 years where we have the humidity to get something tall enough to roll it and actually have it work. So we're stuck with either doing some tillage pass or spraying it with Roundup or spraying it with paraquat. That's just what we're stuck with. We live where we live. That's our choices. So this was no-tilling to that. And this is where we applied the in-furrow. You know, this is the cocaine for the corn. And this is where we didn't. So you can see the difference between the two. Pretty significant difference. And then this is what it looked like 2 weeks later. When we took this picture, how much nitrogen do you think we have applied on that farm? Nothing. You're cheating, Ronald. So we applied 18 pounds of nitrogen right after I took this picture. And that was the first 18 pounds that we applied on that farm. And that went down with worm extract, with fulvic acid, with molasses. So we used a gallon of worm pea, a quart of molasses, and about 8 ounces of fulvic. We had, right after that, we had the only rain of the year. It started raining about 10:30, 10:25, and by 12:15 we had 8.5 inches. The next morning we had 11.69 inches. And so there was June 18, a lot of you saw the Oklahoma Panhandles had a 1,000-year rain event. Yeah, we got it. So we had infiltrated on this farm the Tuesday night in 2.5 hours. We had infiltrated, and we got a Grow Guru probe on that farm. And 2.5 hours after the rainfall, we had 8.69 inches in the ground. The next morning, just under 12. And that was the Wednesday morning. The Friday morning, we had 15 inches. So we had 4 inches of standing water in that farm after that rain that night that we had infiltrated all we could for our soil health at that point after 4 years. But we had still 12 inches in the ground in 6 hours, which is pretty good for us considering we never get that ever. But we still kept 12 inches, and then 2 days later, we had another 4 inches infiltrated. So we had about 15 for the week. That was the only rain we got for the year. That farm ended up 111 pounds of nitrogen, made 194 bushel of corn. I wish we could have gotten into the farm just a little earlier to put a little more nitrogen on. So I think we could have gotten into a 120, 130 nitrogen, 240, 250 corn, but we were behind the 8 ball ever after that rain. Fulvic acid, you can go look into that yourself. Anything we do, whether it's an in-furrow, whether it's through the pivot, whether it's through the drip, whether it's through the sprayer, every pass we make has fulvic acid in it. It has a CEC of about 1,400, It's got a low pH. We live in a high pH area. If you go into eastern Texas, eastern Kansas, where they're low pH, you do not want to put this in the soil because it's low pH. You want to stay with humic. So anytime you're in a low pH environment, stay with humic in soil. Anytime you're in a high pH environment, switch to fulvic. It's a lot more capacity, cation exchange capacity. It's 1,400, humic's about 350. So a lot of difference there, but read up on the advantages of fulvic. It's not a snake oil. It will lift your bricks. It will get more exudation. It is generally a true good product. Now, all fulvics are not the same. So you got to test and make sure where you guy from. Find a guy that's credible. Find a source that's credible. Play around with it, but do start looking into that. PGRs, we're a big fan of plant growth hormone regulators. You can use kelp seaweed extract. They're natural, or you can get synthetic. If you do, Joel Williams calls it roots and shoots. Basically, you get roots and shoot growth anytime you use them. We use that to try and get our corn roots deeper, quicker, and get more root system. Again, there's several natural and there's several synthetic companies out there that have PGRs. Play with them, look at them. This is our alfalfa field. We put that in September of 23. We went through last year, had 4 cuttings, about 6.1 tons. We left the 5th cutting on the farm. We're fixing to start grazing it with the sheep here in the next week or two. And all that alfalfa got was 4 gallons of worm pea, a quart of compost tea, and a quart of molasses. We did that through the pivot when the season started, and we did the same thing through the pivot after the 2nd cutting, and that's all it got. We are going to pull core samples, and we're going to pull tissue samples from that as soon as the spring start, and we'll redesign the program after that and see if we need anything. But zero, I know synthetics is a bad word. A lot of people tell you there's no such thing as a synthetic, but basically purchase fertilizer or whatever you want to call it. We have not applied anything on that farm. Worm pea, that's basically the program. Worm pea, molasses, compost tea. Anytime you have forages, silage, anything like that, I would definitely look into those 3. As a combo, you get a lot of growth, you get a lot of root growth, you get a lot of leaf thickness because of it. If you're looking for volume, if you're looking for potential, feed value, try this. We ended up with like 20 or 22 on the protein side on this thing, and 0 basically fertility besides the natural stuff to use. So do play around with it when you got forages. If you see the green slide on the oats, that same mix that we put out there was in the chemical trailer. My wife wanted the trailer for the water for the sheep. There was about 50, 60 gallons left in the trailer. We had just baled this oats on this farm. She ran the pivot across that to get to the corn. She opened up the valve, drained the trailer, and took the trailer. And 2 weeks later, we had about a foot growth on baled oats just in that little pie. And you can see the pie there. So sometimes, unintended, you look at visual differences on what you do. And that's what I'm saying is, if you haven't tried it yet, do try this mix on anything forage, because obviously it adds a lot of growth to it. Things we're going to try this year. Focus on more balance. We're going to try and, with that ratio calculator that we did, we're going to try and do more ratios. Increase drought resistance by increasing our induced systemic resistance. If you've got a healthier plant that's called induced systemic resistant, that plant's basically beefed up where it can handle anything. Insect, bugs, anything, it's going to fight it off. Find better hybrids, varieties to fit our environment. Fine-tune the Haney. Something we stumbled upon this last 2 weeks is that the ratios does not work when stuff's in the organic form. The ratios only work with the old chemistry. So now, for me, for someone that's really passionate about balancing something, when I'm having 15, 16, 18 ppm zinc per 6 inches in my soil sample, it really bugs me because I'm afraid I'm going to run out of whack on something, but it's created. I didn't put it there. So I'm being told not to worry about it. We'll see. Enhanced foliar, AI tech. We're going to use foliar script with Russell this year. Basically, you take a tissue sample, you send it to the lab sends it to him, and then he does a recommendation per stage of the corn plant through AI, and per ounce tells you what that plant needs at that time. So that's something we're going to try and do on the high yield production this side, is use the AI on the foliar. It's a brand new program. They've got like 50,000 data points that they put this together with, so we're going to give it a shot. Start using imagery on the dry land. We're going to try and see and do some stress management on dry land, do some NDVI, do some chlorophyll pictures, and see if we can beef up maybe, a little bit stress management with a foliar, something like an aloe, anything. Aloe is a lot of a drought mitigant product, so try and spray on some stuff. And then spend more time reading to understand everything what we're doing. Because like I said, we do things that we're passionate about, but we don't always understand it. And I have no idea what the time looks like, but I bet the beer is cold, and if you got questions, we're here. Yes, Zach? Yes. Yeah, we have plenty. The question was if we had nodulization on our alfalfa, and yes, plenty. It's pretty sandy soil, so it actually goes, kind of apeshit on us pretty quickly. So.
Any other questions? Yeah.
On your mix with the worm tea, how much are you trying to put out with that?
That one?
In that mixture on that worm pea, I said, how many pounds per acre?
This one right here?
Yeah.
Depends on the crop. On alfalfa, we run 4 gallon.
4 gallons.
On our corn and sorghum and wheat, we run 1 gallon every time we put anything out.
Is that total of the molasses and the tea?
No. So molasses, we run a quart an acre. Compost tea, we run a quart an acre. And then the worm pea, on the forage crops, we run 4 gallon. On the grain crops, we run 1 gallon. And that's just me thumb sucking on what we see. There's no rhyme or reason for it. So the recommendations are like 5 to 8. Again, we're cheap. We're running as cheap as we can.